Tata Motors has been dominating the Indian EV scene with a range of electric vehicles. They have everything from the Tiago EV, the Tigor EV, they've also launched the Punch EV, and the highest selling electric car in India, the Nexon EV as well. And now finally, after a long wait, they have finally thrown a curveball. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Car and Bike. I'm Bilal, and this is the Tata Curvv EV. Now you already know everything there is to know about the Curvv EV. You know its design, its specification, the features on offer, and even its pricing. And if you don't know, you can visit our website www.carandbike.com for that, or you can watch our previous video about the Curvv. But in this video, we are here in Udaipur to drive it. And in this video, we'll tell you how it is to feel, how's the cabin like, and how is it to drive in the real world condition. So let's begin. But before we begin, if you want to watch this video in Hindi, तो आप हमारे हिंदी चैनल कार एंड बाइक हिंदी पर विजिट कर सकते हैं और ये वीडियो आपके पसंदीदा लैंग्वेज में भी देख सकते हैं. Now this sloping roofline is the highlight of the Curvv. But how does it compare to its sibling, the Nexon EV? Now, comparatively, it has a bigger wheelbase. The overall length is longer, and even despite this sloping roofline, it is taller than the Nexon EV. Now, this one being based on a newer architecture, the active EV architecture, the charging port is plugged in the nose, and there's also some aerodynamic tweaks as well. In profile, these 18-inch gorgeous-looking alloy wheels are also aerodynamically optimized, and they go really well with this overall stance of the Curvv. The 55 profile tire also fills up the wheel arch quite nicely, and it adds to the muscle of this coupe SUV. You would also love the gloss finishes all around for the body cladding, which is reminiscent of more premium cars, and you don't get that in the Nexon either. But it remains to be seen how it will fare when the scratches start to roll in. And talking about muscle, the rear three-quarter is the best angle to look at the Curvv because of its sloping roofline, which I wish was more sharper and met at one point instead of flattening out at the end. But overall, the Curvv is compared to an Italian SUV, and that is a compliment in itself. But you, our dear viewers, what are your views on the design of the Curvv? Do let us know in the comment section below, because we want to know your opinion and what you think about the design of this coupe SUV, especially in this mass market segment. Now on the inside, and it is a familiar looking cabin because the entire cabin is taken directly from the Nexon EV. But I'm also glad that some elements are also borrowed from the bigger siblings, the Harrier and the Safari. This steering, for instance, it's not a two-spoke steering but a four-spoke steering. There's also one crucial change, which is the metallic finish running across the dashboard, which is seen here on the Curvv only. You also get ambient lighting all around, and in some strategic places such as the sunroof, which adds to the overall aura of the car. But otherwise, this is a really familiar cabin, and I wish they could have done a little more to differentiate it from the Nexon EV. For instance, they haven't even changed this center part where USBs are very hard to reach, and despite this being a really modern car, this glitch has been an issue with the older Nexon models as well, and that hasn't been rectified. I also had complaints from the short size of these seats. They are comfortable, no doubt, but the rear backrest could have been slightly taller to provide more support at the back. It hasn't been rectified either. And like the Nexon EV and the bigger siblings, you do get a 12.3-inch touchscreen in the center, which has a modern interface, and it has also been updated with the Arcade app. The Arcade app, which was debuted in the Nexon EV, it is a phenomenal feature for an EV. And I love the fact that it has been upgraded with newer apps and newer features. It is a revolution of its kind, and more car makers should adopt that Arcade EV style apps for their EVs as well. What could have been changed is also the interface for the driver's display. It's an all-digital screen which is directly taken from the Nexon EV without any improvisation. Now, despite having little to no changes compared to the Nexon EV's cabin, this cabin is a really nice place to be, because it is modern, it is ergonomic of sort, and the fit and finish is also not giving me any reasons to complain so far. But Tata's cabin, they are prone to have some glitches. We haven't experienced so far, but when we have the car for a little longer, we might find some. Now on to the back seat of this coupe SUV, because it is the crucial part. Now getting inside is, I found the ingress to be slightly narrower than I would have expected. But once inside, you'd also notice that since the battery is placed underneath the floor, you sit at an awkward position. Luckily, in the Curvv EV, you do get adjustment for the backrest, and despite that, the legs are slightly on the higher side, and it lacks the under thigh support as well, which is again expected because of this platform. With the Curvv's higher or a bigger dimension, I expected the space here would have felt more than you get in the Nexon EV, but that's not the case. I get ample amount of legroom, even the headroom. Despite this coupe roofline, it's decent for my frame, which I'm 5.5, and I don't find the cabin to be too cramped. Although it's strictly a four-seater in my opinion, because sitting three people here would be a really tight fit. You can fit in a kid in the center, but nothing more than that. I also wish the dimension of this panoramic sunroof was slightly bigger. But otherwise, sitting here, I won't be complaining if I have to do a full 500 to 1000 kilometer journey back here. On the practicality front, you do get rear AC vents with a dedicated Type-C port. There's also folding armrest with cup holders and 3-point seat belts for all passengers at the back. But I wish the door pockets would have been slightly bigger, and the door design could have been again improved over the Nexon EV, but that's not the case again. Lastly, the 500 liters of boot space is much bigger than the Nexon EV, and despite being a coupe SUV, 500 liters of boot space is cavernous, and you can carry a weekend luggage of 4 quite easily. So behind the wheel of the Tata Curvv EV, and the first thing that I have to talk about is the visibility. Now for any coupe SUVs, the rear visibility is a big challenge, and that's the same case with the Curvv EV as well. The rear quarter window, it's narrow, and by narrow I mean it's actually really narrow. And more than that, the more important part is that the rear pillar, actually it's very thick, so the rear visibility is a bit of a hindrance. So newer drivers, or the drivers who are not used to driving such type of tight visibility cars, they might find it some time to get used to it. Now as for the specification, Curvv EV is also available with 2 battery pack options. Smaller one is the familiar 45 kWh, but the one we are driving here is the bigger one. It's a newer 55 kWh battery pack, and this version that we're driving, it has an output of close to 170 horsepower, and the 250 Newton meter, it's standard across both the battery packs. The lower one, it makes around 150 horsepower. Now this 160 horsepower right away is felt when you are behind the wheel. The acceleration, as you would expect from an EV, it's smooth, it's refined, and as that we have experience with the Nexon EV as well, the acceleration is quite linear and smooth, and there's barely any delay or lag. There are drive modes, the normal one, the Eco, City and Sports. The Eco one, it does feel subdued, and the City or the Comfort mode is the one most of the drivers would be driving it in. But if you want some eagerness from your car, if you want the throttle response to be sharp and precise, the sports mode is really good for it. Now Tata claims a 0 to 100 km/h time of around 9 seconds. And the way the power is put down when you go hard on the throttle, it's not hard to believe that 9 seconds is achievable for a ton. Now part of the update in the Curvv is a new feature addition that all EVs, the bigger one especially, they come with. It's called AVAS in Tata's term, but what it basically does is it creates an artificial sound for the pedestrian safety. Because EV makes no sound, an artificial sound needs to be added so that at lower speeds, the pedestrians are aware that an EV is nearby. But luckily, this sound is a good sounding one, and it doesn't sound like a nuisance at first. And luckily, it also goes off when you cross 20 km/h mark. So that's a good feature addition now. You also get this bigger steering wheel, which compared to the Nexon feels quite hefty to hold. Again, the steering is borrowed from the Harrier, remember? So here in this Curvv EV, this chunky steering wheel, it adds to the overall driving dynamics. It feels large, but the steering in itself, it feels quite assisted. It goes 3 turns almost lock to lock, which means it isn't the quickest out there, and you have to put in a lot of inputs, especially when you are uh, belting out all those 160 horsepower, especially in the tight turns. Sure, the steering at city speeds it's quite light and comfortable and pretty easy to get used to. And good amount of weight is added to it once you hit the highway speeds. But then again, that artificial feeling is always persistent because of the ADAS features it comes with. Now the Curvv EV, it comes with level 2 ADAS, and we haven't had a chance to test all of them out, but some of them, for example, the emergency braking or the emergency front collision warning, they do work quite pretty well, especially when there's cattle on the road. Lastly, one of the strongest suits of the Curvv EV has to be its ride quality. At slow speed, again, the ride is quite absorbent, and you do feel that every bumps and creases is taken in quite flat, and it absorbs most of the harshness that we had encountered all morning. And when the roads really start to disappear, it comes on its own. The suspension setup, it really comes on its own. It takes us ride really bad potholes, even the sharpest ones, with a nice composure. And when you really take these sharp potholes or the irregularities at a higher speeds, some amount of those are transferred inside the cabin, but they are still pretty well dampened out. Comparatively, Tata, they know how to make suspension for the Indian road conditions, and the Curvv's stronger suits has remained its suspension setup. At highway speed, there are some movement on the undulations, as you might have noticed that we are doing highway speeds right now, and there's some undulation, but it never gets to a point of being uncomfortable. So overall, the Curvv EV is really a nice car to drive. It's comfortable, it's very well adaptive to your everyday driving conditions, and if you want to buy the Curvv EV as your one car garage, even its 400 kilometer of realistic range, the claim range is way above 500. But my experience in the range of these EVs is anything to go by. I would expect the Curvv EV to do 400 kilometers in a single charge, which isn't too bad for a car at this price point. So, the Tata Curvv EV, it's everything that we expected it to be and slightly more. Sure, the Coupe-SUV body style might be its biggest highlight, but it won't be its biggest selling point, because what works in its favor are, first, yeah, sure, it's good looks. Secondly, it's the overall package helped by the Tata's expertise in EVs, and it is also good to drive coupled with a very fantastic ride quality. But it's not without fault either. Sure, the new platform could have liberated more cabin space compared to the Nexon EV. Also, the design of the cabin or the Russian doll design of the entire new Tata lineup might be put off for some buyers. And also, the few glitches that the Tata cars are quite well known for, those small electronic glitches, it's also persistent with the Curvv EV. These are not big issues, but small glitches, they are quite irritating. But the biggest selling point for the Curvv EV has to be its aggressive pricing. Ranging between 17 to 22 lakh rupees ex-showroom, the Curvv EV would not only attract buyers who would have otherwise gone for the MG ZS EV or the Mahindra XUV 400 or even its own sibling, the Nexon EV, it would also give buyers of CSUV segment who would have otherwise gone for the petrol automatic or the diesel automatic something to reconsider. That's all from me in this video. Hope you liked it, and if you did, do hit that like button and share it forward with your friends and family. And if you have any other questions regarding the Curvv EV, do write them down in the comment section below, and I promise we will answer them all. This is Bilal signing off. Until next time.